after 9. So we went back in to do budget, we called in early. So Neil, go ahead. We're doing something on Transportation Improvement District Intergovernmental Agreement, Amendment 7.
Number 7, right. This is, we've been doing an IGA each year, but it was to kind of pick up the, in the past it was to pick up the TID, the TIF money for the P&G TIF to get into the TID so we could do our projects on Mesa Montgomery and all the areas around.
Didn't the P&G hit about the end, or did
it ended?
Okay.
That ended. So we
This year is the last of the collection, I believe.
right. This is last year. There won't be any more in 2023. So, but we have the big project that we have on this IGA this year is the Mercy Health project that we entered into agreement last month. That was earlier this month. So we want to make sure that we get started on the project as soon as we can. So we're asking you to adopt this IGA number 7, and then the TID will adopt it at their meeting this Friday, so that we can go ahead and authorize bids for, or to authorize right-of-way acquisition for the project and to solicit bids for the construction bids for the project. So it's a little earlier than what we would normally do. We would normally do it in January, but we want to get started on that project as soon as possible. The agreement that you signed last month was to have substantial completion, at least for their Mercy to open up their facility by November 1 of 2023. And we would, if anything, we'll just get the traffic signal up front, and maybe a temporary signal running, but we have a pretty aggressive time schedule to meet. So anyway, that's basically it. We're talking about $7 million. If you look at the exhibit. Exhibit B, $7.5 million from the that we would be collecting in our. It's a county fund 7757. We've already received our first payment, $1.1 million to go towards right-of-way acquisition. So we've already received.
So what exactly are you asking us? I'm not following.
Adopt the IGA number 7, so that we can start collecting money. And we've already set up a fund, but we want to transfer this money over to the IGA, so that they're over to the TID, so we can do this Mercy Health project.
So I guess the question is, so what we're adopting is this Exhibit A list, which is different from what we previously had adopted. There's changes in this Exhibit A list. What are the changes?
It would be, we have anything that says new. There you go.
Okay. The only one is first off, is it the $7.5 million for the Mercy Health pass-through? Is that basically the big change?
Yes, that's the big one.
And then besides that, what else?
We have the I-75, State Route 73 interchange improvement project. That was a safety project that Franklin and Springboro got money from the state to add a turn lane to create a dual left from westbound 73 onto southbound 75.
Okay.
That was it was 100% funds, and the state said that's all you're getting. And it turns out that it looks like it's going to cost a little bit more. So we're we don't know yet how much that is going to be, but we're adding that project to the list. That may be something that we have to add another 100,000 or so to.
The engineer's office.
That we would use.
Oh, you would be using some of the infrastructure money that the commissioners have set
Correct,
aside
correct.
towards that project.
Towards that project. It's just really to fill a gap. We're not sure how much it would be. Hopefully it's not anything, but. And then we had on the US 22 State Route 3 corridor, we were looking at improvements from the Little Miami River up to West Road on two separate areas. But we've added, we're actually going past that. We're requesting that we go past that to Old Mill Road and pick up an intersection improvement at Old 3C and Creekwood. That's a high crash area, but we can't seem to get money for it yet. We're still working on safety funds from ODOT to do that project. We're recommending a roundabout, but we just don't have funds for it. This traffic signal, putting a traffic signal doesn't help the problem there. So we've requested that we add this to the list too, and again, we would use TIF money or the TID money to leverage federal funds to make that project happen. And then we have the King Avenue, Kings Court to Miami Avenue on the King Avenue corridor. You've approved the King Avenue, Kings Court roundabout, which the plans are done, and we're ready to go to construction on that this summer. But we're looking at improving, we have some drainage issues on King Avenue, and we would like to, and kind of other, it's mainly drainage, and it would just be good to fix this problem while we're doing the roundabout project. We've got a roundabout project and a curve realignment just south of Kings Mills that were in part of the that King Avenue, King Court project. And this was done in conjunction. It kind of originally was to get these projects done before the King Avenue Bridge project was done, but we couldn't seem to get that coordinated right. So, but we're asking that you include the King Avenue, Kings Court to King Miami Avenue. It's about a $300,000 project that we would do simultaneously with the roundabout project, and we would do it when we close the King Avenue side of the King Avenue Bridge. There won't be any traffic on here, so just a great time to get that project done. And then we've got the Kings Mill, Kings Island project around Mercy Health. And then we have channel maintenance projects. I'm bringing the money to the 202 will be bringing the money to the channel maintenance. The reason we're using the TID to do this particular project is there's only one outfit that uses trees. They cut trees and then anchor them to the bank to slow down the creek. It builds up sediment, and that protects the stream bank. We're using it right now. We just did a project on Lower Springboro Road a few years ago, and it seems to be working out really well. It builds up sediment. We also did it near the covered bridge over the Little Miami River, upstream from the bridge. We redirected flow to the middle of the bridge, keep it away from the piers and the abutments, and that seems to be working out really well. So, but it gets kind of expensive, and it's hard to bid this particular project using our bidding process. There just aren't many There are people that say they can do it, but they're not really, the experience of others is that it's not really, it doesn't really work. So we would prefer using the procurement method that the TID, we've got some flexibility with that. We can go with a sole source on these really they're kind of expensive projects, but they're cheaper than putting retaining walls, drill pier walls, and things like that. So those are the new projects.
Okay. Any questions about those? I'm okay with them all.
And Neil, you're working with the city of Lebanon, they were in a little bit ago on 63 widening, so
Right.
essentially that's going to be in a complete TID project, or because they're applying for their own STP money? and-
They're applying for their own STP funds. We haven't talked to them about, they haven't approached us about doing it as a community project.
Yeah, I think they just said something about. the
They'd probably
TID.
like to, yeah. I'll tell you what, if they had the funds.
They were unsuccessful in getting the funding.
Yeah, they applied for STP funds to add the third lane from Neil Armstrong Way to Parkside to McClure Road, but they didn't get funding. We applied for funding to improve the interchange at 71 and State Route 48, and we didn't get funding for that either, so.
But we are moving forward with down around the prison property widening.
Yes, that project is scheduled to bid in April, May.
And that's a big deal, right? That's a lot of
Yeah.
widening.
Yes, yeah, that'll be a 2-year project too, and Duke is close to being out of the way. We still have the other telecom companies that need to get their lines out of the way, but we're close. We're acquiring the last pieces of right-of-way east of 741 on the Outer Bank
Have we,
property.
that's a good point. Have we ever thought about that, or what are the rules on our easements on either side? You know, if there's a potential that we're gonna ever widen a road, should we force, especially all the underground utilities, to be out wider initially than what they are now? Because it just seems like this is such a pain, and if we know 20 or 30 years from now, there's a good chance this road's going to widen,
Yeah,
shouldn't we maybe have them put it where they don't have to move it?
they would probably want us to pay for the right-of-way, the easements to get them to move out,
But who determines how wide an easement is? Is that per statute? Or is that by us?
That's really, for an easement for them, that would be dependent upon them. They would be the ones to determine how much room they need to, for their utility. And generally, I think they acquire, if they do a project themselves, well, it depends on the size of the project too. I mean, I think when Duke ran their high-pressure gas main up Butler Warren Road, they got a 25-foot easement. And that was for a 24-inch high-pressure gas main. And when they they're running a new electric line to get around our King Avenue Bridge, is that a 40-foot?
Well, I'm just thinking,
But they're the ones, to answer your question, they're the ones that determine what they need.
Bruce, how do we do that? Because I have a feeling, my gut says there's gonna be a lot more public utilities run in this county on rural roads, small roads that are gonna eventually become bigger roads in the near future. That if I'm running fiber next to, State Route 23 and we know it's gonna widen at some point, doesn't it make sense for us to have them do it to the wider area now, as opposed to 10 or 15 years from now, making them go dig it up and redo it and do the whole process again? Who makes that call?
Well, it has to be necessary. So necessary would be determined at the time that the project's being done, not in anticipation of what's going to happen in the future. If if we need to acquire an easement. If they need something more than what we have in the form of either an easement, public utility easement or right-of-way, then they have to get their own. But in our permits, we reserve the right to, by granting them the permit, to require them to relocate in the future if a project necessitates it, and that's on their dime, not ours.
Yeah, but you see where I'm going with it? If we,
I understand.
it's a high probability, okay, they're 20 feet from the right of way, or the center line right now, but we know the center line's gonna change because we're gonna add another lane at some point, so they really should be 30 feet or whatever.
Well, I mean, that's a good point, but,
Well,
I mean,
the other thing we were just talking about, and maybe you've expanded it beyond that, out where the state owns property, that's a different animal. Because the state can only grant an easement for a finite period of time. It can't grant perpetual easements. And so a lot of the easements that we have may only be for like 15 years, subject to being renewed. They have additional restrictions on things. And then there's a statute that requires, if it's a state project, then the state has to pay for that, as opposed to the utility having to pay for its own relocation. Luckily, that doesn't apply to us.
But that's also what I'm asking, I guess, if we have right-of-way, right, on pretty much every public road, we can do stuff on either side of it, correct?
yes, for so many feet, yes.
And is that determined that whatever that right-of-way is from the center line, is that set in statute, or do we determine that?
It's set by statute, and that's always a gnarly problem, because the commissioners back in the day, in the 1800s, might have different statutes that they would, when they view the road, would determine what the right-of-way, so it could be anywhere from 40 foot to 60 foot or 66 foot. So there's a lot of research when we do our projects to make sure that we've got, what right-of-way do we have?
And so that's, once that's determined from 100 years ago, that's not changed? That we can't change that?
Well, we can. I mean, we would have to acquire, we may have to
So then
acquire
we're paying
right-of-way,
for it?
Right. We would have to
Yes.
pay for it.
Pay the property.
Right.
Yeah, what we typically go on is what actual use has been. Because some, those old establishment statutes had this varying amount of right-of-way that counties' roads might establish as right-of-way. And historically, it was done that way. And then in more modern times, we've just looked at what are we using. And maybe we look at where the utility poles are set beyond the road ditch and decide, well, that's what the right-of-way line is because it's being used. And anything beyond that, whether the old statute said 60 foot, but we're only using less than that, then we've gone out and acquired it.
Sure, but if there's a new road that goes through the middle of farm field right now, we know it's gonna be high traffic or whatever, we're not paying for the right-of-way right now, are we? If there's a new road going in and we're just.
If we're building the road, if it's a developer building the road, they'll dedicate the right-of-way according to our official thoroughfare plan, which could be, depending on the type of road, would vary. It could be for anywhere from, 30, 35 feet, 36 feet to 100 and,
All right. Well, I mean, again, we're not gonna solve it right now, but I would think about that subject because we know there's gonna be a lot more new underground utility laid in parts of this
Oh, yeah.
county.
Oh, yeah. We're seeing it already. I mean, you've got all these broadband companies, putting fiber out in the right-of-way, It's getting to be.
Right, and I'm just
not a
thinking that,
problem.
okay, that's great for today, it's in the right of way, here it is, but at some point, we widen the road, and then we're going back to them and saying, all right, dig it all up or retrench it and put in a new line, even though it's supposed to be there for 100 years,
Yeah.
which is silly. So trying to think about how do
No,
we,
you're right, I mean, it's, and we're having the problem already on, in front of Mercy Health. We've got all kinds of utility lines that we're having to work around, and it's, and to have them relocate this kind of affects the schedule of when we can do our road projects. So we're trying to finesse these utilities in order to
right, it's just
do that. So,
expensive and
your point.
inefficient. So can we, from planning or from a regulatory standpoint, require people to do blank in the right of way, or expanding it, or give us some special type of an easement for, I don't know, but it's just, is there anything we can do?
I'm sure.
Sometimes there's not, depending on the development too, if it's commercial, there may not be enough room to accommodate that. But on the rural side, there may be room, but then you're, in advance acquiring all the right of way from property owners. I don't know if that would be considered a necessity or not.
Yeah, and especially when you get in the commercial arena, those are the type of developments where they're going to push back and say, well, you don't have a necessity for, and they can challenge our right to take that property, take that easement, if there's not a necessity for it. In the rural setting, a little less likely people to challenge that.
Right, I'm just thinking of, it's open property, it's open, there's nothing necessarily built right up next to the, it's either a yard or a field or what have you, and there's literally just gonna be an underground cable on it. So we're not really stopping them from enjoying the use of their property, there's just gonna be an underground cable on it, is what I'm thinking about.
Okay.
All right, well, look, anything about the current, adoption of the current matter, this amendment to the intergovernmental agreement? Any other questions about that? Amendment number 7? Do we have a motion to, do we have to adopt that?
Yes.
Is it a resolution?
Yes.
Okay. We have a motion to adopt the resolution to accept amendment number 7 to the intergovernmental agreement between Warren County, Ohio and Warren County, TID.
So moved.
And yes,
Yes, do we call the roll on that, Bruce?
Sure.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Neil.
Tina, did we have a resolution on the easement agreement with the city of Lebanon?
They adopted it,
Oh,
but
okay.
I wrote it. They did adopt it.
Okay, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
And it'll be signed today. It'll be signed today. It'll be signed today with the city of Lebanon.
Bringing back the past.
I have to give it to
Did
you.
you already
I'm
sign
on the pen.
Did you already sign it?
But I'll check.
Okay, is there anything else?
Motion to adjourn. See you, Kurt.
Hey, thanks for following up with him. I appreciate it.
Do we have a second on that motion to adjourn?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I was
We don't-
praising
we don't need any more
the
votes.
engineer's office
bet.
for following up with the constituent. I
Okay,
did my
thank you.
homework,
I'll get a pen and
Candace.
sign this.
And there's a